is a food and agribusiness management consulting firm, and we're based in Dublin in Ireland, and we also have offices in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, and in Accra in West Africa. We work right across the continent of Africa. We also work very much in Europe and across the Middle East. And we work with government and private sector clients, and also we work right across the food and agricultural value chain, from primary production, processing, distribution, retail, and food service. So in terms of what I want to talk to you about, the actual subject of unlocking capital, we know that Africa imports approximately 90 billion of food and agricultural products each year. And in doing so, it very much deprives governments of vital foreign reserves that can be used for other means, not least the pharmaceutical sector and for other vital capital equipment, infrastructure, etc. And there's really no reason for Africa to have to import such quantums of food. And Africa actually has the capacity to be self-sufficient and to be a net exporter, but that's not the case. So it's very much a resource-rich and capital-poor continent, highly reliant on subsistence agriculture, with over 50% of farmers very much in the subsistence category, hand tilling, very much reliant on rain-fed agriculture, and using poor quality inputs, fertilizer and seeds. So self-sufficiency, we know, is absolutely a vital component in developing and driving towards self-sufficiency. And in that context, we know that agriculture has 11 times more impact in relieving poverty than any other sector. And with this pandemic, there's an additional 120 million people who are going hungry or seriously undernourished, along with the 700 million before COVID-19. And most of that additional malnourished people are live on the continent of Africa. So there's a vast amount of untapped natural resources on the continent. And really, the challenge for governments, for society generally, and for actors within the food and agricultural industry is to tap into this vast amount of natural resources and to look at sustainable ways to develop and improve agricultural systems and value chains. We know that land tenure plays also a major role in agriculture and in funding for agriculture, and less than or approximately 10% of land on the continent of Africa is under secure tenure. In addition, over 50% of people are living on communal land, and in many cases with very poor little rights, or very poor rights. So all of these factors really are not conducive to a secure funding system, and all of that then, if you like, feeds into the many reasons and complicated situation around accessing capital. So it's really important that Africa builds its value chain system, and that's really a farm to fork system in the developed world, in Europe, North America, and elsewhere across the world that exists, and we take it for granted. And farmers produce various commodities, processors have access to those commodities, are able to maximize utilization, processing utilization, and we can all enjoy in food on our supermarket shelves or in our restaurants when they're functioning and operating. But that's not the case in Africa. That lack of value chain system needs to be addressed and needs to be very much targeted and built, and not just one single component, because no processing entity can survive financially, economically, or in any other way without access to sufficient raw material to process. And no primary producer can exist on their own without an outlet or a market for what they produce. Looking then at the areas that really need investment, and storage is really important. I mean, we have 35% of product is going to waste on the continent, and lack of storage is a real factor or a missing piece in the infrastructural side of things. In addition to that, then that compounds poor prices. Farmers are rushing product to the market. They don't have the capacity to store, or the downstream agents or processors don't have the capacity to store for processing. And all of these things then feed into or drive poor prices or poor stability around pricing mechanisms. Also, mechanization at all levels across the value chain are needed. Primary production, processing, distribution, and in addition to that, knowledge, greater knowledge transfer, knowledge around agronomy, knowledge around climate action mitigation measures, and how they can be dealt with, as they're going to continue to have a very profound impact on the continent in particular. And I think the role of cooperatives, we would see that they as having a very important role, particularly in the aggregation area, and giving farmers, smallholders and farmers, greater power around consolidation, around ownership of output and ownership of downstream assets. The missing piece, very much, if you like, the square peg in the round hole, is the lack of financing and funding, particularly for primary agriculture. And our experience, this is particularly around for SME, small, medium enterprises, who either want to forward integrate or want to develop or build their value chain system. And we see a combination of reasons for this in relation to not having the fund, or rather not having the necessary level of development. Either the project is too greenfield or too brownfield. The promoters need to provide a minimum capital of 20%. There's insufficient security. Promoters have no track record. Ticket size is too large or too small, or also there just may not be a policy around funding primary agriculture. And these are the reasons that are usually given by the various agencies and banks that are involved in funding food and agriculture. And it leaves this gap, if you like, significant gap, funding gap in the market. Looking then at what are the potential solutions, and where the areas that policy needs to be focused on, and where there needs to be significant, I think, changes. That is how we can improve funding for agri-food, small and medium enterprises. There needs to be more realistic application criteria applied to applications in Africa. I think a lot of the criteria that's been used is relevant to farming and food companies, particularly in the more developed parts of the world. In addition to that, there needs to be greater focus across the value chain, and an understanding that if you're funding primary production, that is a very important component in the wider value chain piece. The weighted average cost of capital is really important, the access to capital and the affordability of capital. And we know that many banks across Africa are charging anything from 15 to 30% interest rates. And there's no agricultural system in the world that can actually survive and absorb those kind of interest rates. So there needs to be mechanisms and greater mechanisms and interventions around supporting lower interest rates, lower cost of capital, not just access to capital, but a lower and more affordable cost as well. Equity funding has also a greater role to play, and that's through blended options where multilaterals and the public sector, the DFIs, etc., will invest or take first loss guarantees or equity guarantees that will help to catalyze and attract investment from private equity. And this is really important also for public-private partnerships, but also to bring in the private sector, which is really absolutely key in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, which Africa badly needs and has been underperforming for the last 30, 40 years. Greater availability of trade finance is also key to support domestic and international trade, and also to trickle right down to farmer level. And as I said earlier, equity guarantees to attract private investors for public-private partnerships. So I think there are the kind of all the pieces of the jigsaw that are really, really important that need to be addressed both at policy level and also in terms of actions by local banks, by DFIs, by multilaterals, etc. So I'm going to hopefully hand back or see if we have Sarah with us at this stage. I think she may be there now. I see you there now, Sarah. So maybe I'll hand over to you and let you make your introduction and presentation. Good morning to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Malachy. And very sorry for joining through my phone. I wasn't able to connect through my computer, but very happy to be part of this interesting conversation today around unlocking capital for agri-food SMEs. So my name is Ouadili. I'm an investment officer within the African Development Bank. I'm working on the agriculture division finance. And we do mostly provide and structure financing solutions for large cap companies on the agri-food sectors, but also we have a great focus today on structuring the best solutions for SMEs. So Malachy, I don't know if you can share maybe on your screen my presentation. It will maybe be helpful for me to go through it gradually, if that's possible. Oops, I think that we have lost my co-speaker, but okay, that's fine. I can go through the presentation. I mean, I've been putting some slides together just as a follow-up presentation of the great presentation provided this morning by Malachy. So what we will be discussing here very quickly is why SMEs have been more than ever the increased focus of many organizations targeting a transformative approach of the sector. We will also quickly discuss why we need to rethink or maybe redesign the value chain approach as we know it as of today, what kind of integrated solution we should provide to unlock further capital, and what are the areas of partnership. So very quickly, the focus on SMEs is more important than ever for multiple reasons. And the first one is that small and medium enterprises do play the most critical role. They are absolutely key to any sustainable and inclusive value chain projects, and they contribute the most to social and economic impact. So as per the International Labour Organization, 60% of the net employment derives from small and agribusiness enterprises. So we are on slide 3, please. But within this particular COVID-19 context, I would say from a health crisis, we are clearly experiencing a social and economic crisis, which is highlighting the vulnerabilities of the global food value chains that we know. And in the African continent, we have particularly a more urgency towards reducing the imports of key crops. And therefore, there is a necessity to support more inclusive value chains. Yet, small and medium enterprises are still the segment that is the most underfinanced and the most vulnerable to external shocks. So on the slides 4, I wanted to share some good news and positive indicators, of course, with regards to the business opportunities around small and medium enterprises. We are observing a growing, of course, demand for local, traditional, healthy, and improved foods from a growing middle African income class, together with rapid urbanization. While key step crops are still massively imported. So what we want to focus on, if we go on the slide we really want to focus towards a more, let's say, holistic approach and an inclusive one. And value chains are very well known financing models that do improve the access to finance to all its participants, and most of their participants are small and medium enterprises. Value chains are great tools of financial inclusion. They, through their business linkages, do provide a good level of data and information that do provide a good level of confidence to financial providers, it is a good way, I would say, to enter properly the agri-food sector in a less risky context. However, the vast majority of SMEs are still outside of the structured value chain. And I would say that in addition to addressing the financing gap, which is of course an urgency, there is also other aspects that and challenges that needs to be addressed and that needs to be taken into consideration. So if we go to the next slide, those challenges are very well known, and it will be actually counterproductive to only focus on specific financial instruments. We also need to address the policy gap as well as the infrastructure gap. So if you look at the slide number 6, we very well know all those challenges. They are pretty common and very well identified. At policy level, we have issues around inputs or taxation, the subsidies and land tenure at farm level. And on the infrastructure side, there's of course the issue around road accessibility. Farm producers need to be more linked to their processors and the end market to make sure that they do earn a fair share of their profits. There is issues around irrigation systems, storage facilities. All these issues are very well known, and we need clearly some parallel interventions from governments. So what we really need to focus on is interventions that are coordinated with other main stakeholders such as governments. So if we go into the next slide, what we need is an integrated response, and using the value chain framework is very helpful to identify the specific financial needs at every stage of a structured process. So here we have tried to, let's say, put together the actors of the value chain in line with their type of activities and specific needs, but also risk. So if you look at the first block, for instance, which we group small farm producers and cooperatives, the needs are more related into input financing. So input loan and seasonal loans are very much required. Grants are also very welcome, as well as technical assistance. If you look at the other blocks, which do regroup the vast majority of the small and medium enterprises, including processors or distributors, what they really need very often is financing to cover their working capital requirements. So revolving credit facilities and overdraft loans are very well appreciated. And for large companies and large agri-processors, the request is more so long-term loans to cover capex expansion needs. So how do we see the role of AdB and DFIs in that particular framework? We think that DFIs should help to, not to compete with commercial lenders, of course, but to unlock the flow of financial instruments, and guarantee mechanisms are very helpful, particularly risk-sharing facilities. They have proven to be successful and sort of innovative financing type of solutions. And they are structured around value chain framework. So there is clearly a need for coordination and bringing in together various key actors around selected priority value chains. We need to bring in together financial institutions, DFI, technical assistance providers, business advisor firms all together. And we also need to make sure that we are aligned with the national strategic plans, because we will need in this particular project a support from the government, whether it is regards to a policy framework or additional investments to reduce the infrastructure gaps. So that brings us to the last slides, which focuses on building maybe the right platform to structure the right areas of partnership. So we have identified, of course, the value chain actors themselves. They need to be part of the process at the beginning of the discussions. We need to work more hand in hand with the existing commercial lenders, but also specialized banks that do have the experience in structuring tailor-made financing solutions to agri companies. We need more rural banks, microfinance institutions, etc. We need also to engage much more with local communities. We need to discuss and work hand in hand with farm organizations. They do play this aggregating activities that is much needed, especially at the upfront stream of the value chains. So the idea is really to make sure that we structure all together and in a coordinated way the approach, and a platform, I think, more than necessary to organize all those interventions. Because, of course, I will say at the conclusion, the idea is really to avoid the duplication of efforts, and for that we need to align around common strategic goals. So thank you